am, the Nobel Peace Prize Forum. I flew to Minnesota yesterday, and on my way here, there was news about the Nobel Prize. I don't know if you guys heard this. President Vladimir Putin from Russia was just nominated for a Nobel, which made sense to me. He is a man of peace, peace of Georgia, peace of Ukraine. It's not where we want to go with the Nobel. I think that's pretty clear. I think that's not going to happen. I'll talk a little bit about that later. But you know what? I was thinking about how I wanted to address this crowd, because I talk about the world all over the place, right? But it's a broad conversation. It's a public conversation. I thought what I wanted to discuss in the context of this forum, and you can ask whatever questions you want when we have a chance to sit down and discuss, is how do we think about peace in today's world? Because today's world is so radically different from what we've experienced in any of our lifetimes. When we think about concepts of geopolitics, we think about war and peace. It is so different. The wars we're fighting are so different. The power structure we have to fight it with is so different. The efforts to create peace are so different. I remember a little after the financial crisis, I had a meeting in Monaco, and I had the opportunity to do a speech alongside Tony Blair. And it was just at the point when it was obvious that the G20 was not working. This constellation of the world's 20 largest economies that's supposed to be running the world today. They all get together, the heads of state, and they're supposed to be figuring out how we get out of the financial crisis, how we build the global economic order, how we build the global political order. It's not the G7, it's not the G8, it's the G20, right? And Tony Blair was very concerned that we were not displaying sufficient leadership in the G20. The Brits and the Americans together, the special relationship, we don't hear much about the special relationship anymore. But back then we still did. The special relationship wasn't doing much to take a real leadership role at the global stage. And he said that we needed to. That we needed to really remember how important and unique our role, our values could be in making a difference for global peace. And everyone certainly receptive to the message. So I asked him, I said, well, you know, when I look at the countries that make up the G20, countries like China and Russia and Saudi Arabia, right? I said, you know, there are a lot of countries that have very different perspectives of what kind of a political system you should have. They oppose our views on things like governance and rule of law. They oppose our views on things like the structuring of a free market. So, given that, Mr. Prime Minister, which of our values do you believe that we should adapt or compromise on or even jettison so that we will be able to effectively work with what is a much more diverse group, right? And he said, you know, that's a really good question. At least I remember him. That's what he said. I might have just heard that because, you know, we hear what we want to hear. He said it's a really good question. Really exceptional. He said it was an exceptionally good question. Let's face it, the fantastic, best question he'd heard in years. And he said that, you know, but when you think about it, there are really none of our values that we should adapt or compromise on. Because ultimately, our values are the right values. That's what he said. And I applauded that. I said that I really appreciate that he answered honestly. Because I do believe that that answer reflects the way he really feels. I do. But then I said something else, which is, I also happen to believe that the vast majority of American and British policymakers agree with you. But as a consequence of that, the G20 won't work. As a consequence of that, we will not see global leadership. As a consequence of that, our ability to respond to problems around the world will be severely undermined. I believe that. And this is our challenge. Because, for more than half a century now, we have had a world. Globalization, we call it, but it's not globally driven. Globalization has been driven by the United States. We came out of World War II, right? And we created that world order with our values, our preferences, our priorities, our friends. We rebuilt them. Former enemies in some cases. MacArthur in Japan, Marshall Plan in Europe. We created Bretton Woods Accord, World Bank, IMF, World Trade Organization, United Nations. All of those organizations, every institution out there that dealt with global leadership in the post-war era wasn't created by the world, it was created by the United States. And as a consequence, it supported things like a free market, it supported things like a representative liberal democracy, it supported things that comported very well with American ideals of how the world should be run. Now, they sounded global, right? World Trade Organization, World Bank sounds global. The World Series sounds global. International House of Pancakes sounds global. They're in Guatemala. You can check. They're in Canada. They are not global. They're not global. World Series, Canadian team, not global, right? These institutions that we've created, that we want everyone to pay attention to, not global. And I wanted to give you a few examples of how the fact that we think that things are global when in reality they're American get us into very serious trouble. Because we need to change that perspective. And we don't need to change it because we want to be better people. That would be nice. We need to change it because if we don't change it, it's going to start hurting us, right? For decades, if you were from another country and you didn't like the American perspective, tough. We're really big. We can demand that you accept that or you're out in the cold, right? And when the Soviet Union collapsed, it became even more obvious. China is going to become the world's largest economy soon. They have a radically different perspective on how the world economies and political systems should run. When they become the world's largest economy, they will still disagree with us on these issues. They will still be poor at a per capita basis. They will still be authoritarian. They will still be state capitalist. The state will be the largest actor in their economy. They will still disagree with us. Furthermore, they will have the ability to make those disagreements count in the way folks operate in other corners of the world. It therefore behooves us, for the first time in any of our lives, to at least understand, not agree. Maybe we agree. Maybe we learn to agree more. Maybe we compromise. But at the very least, we could start with understanding that their perspective is different. I remember we used to talk about the pivot to Asia. Good example, under Obama first term, Hillary Clinton, pivot to Asia. And our Secretary of Defense, former Secretary of Defense, was asked, what exactly does the pivot to Asia mean for China? Some people say you're trying to contain China. He said, no, actually, that's not it. The purpose of the pivot to Asia is to help China more effectively grow in Asia, right? It's to help them develop stronger power across the region. Now, the Chinese are not stupid. It's offensive to them to think that we could say something that's so patently untrue and that they would buy it. That implies that either we think they're stupid, number one, or number two, we don't actually care what their perspective is. We don't want them to think either of those things. That's bad. Another example that's gone on for more than 10 years now, responsible stakeholdership. We've been telling the Chinese for a very long time, we need China to become responsible stakeholders. The United States needs to do more burden sharing. We're providing a lot of the global leadership. We need the Chinese to provide more global leadership because they're going to become the largest economy. As they grow, they need to do more.